Good morning, Doctor. You're obviously very passionate about the National Science Foundation, as are many of us, a national institution, and I appreciate your own personal passion and work, but you are here representing our president and our administration in presenting really his overall budget priorities, and that's what we're after here is priorities. And you know, I read your testimony, I listen to your words, and it all sounds incredibly good. I look at your testimony, and you talk about the importance of National Science Foundation, the critical importance of basic research across the world, the contributions not only to science but to the economy. And I read through your specific programs, the survey telescopes, the big ideas. I agree with all of it. I appreciate, in particular, the advancement of the Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope. And then I get to the one catch line, which is that NSF's FY2020 budget request is 9.6 below FY18, 12.6 below FY19. And I ask the basic question which Mr. Cartwright asked and which Mr. Chris just asked, what's going on? Budgets reflect priorities. The inescapable conclusion that I come to when I read the testimony and listen to your answers is that NSF in general is not prioritized within this president and this administration's budget. I cannot explain a reduction of over 10% over last fiscal year when you have thanked this committee a couple of times already for the increase in funding in FY19 and of course a 10% increase, and then Mr. Cartwright's observation that we're now back to FY12 levels. I just ask you the basic question, what am I to make of that? I look at your budget splits. I see reductions of almost 10% in your basic programs, and then I do see, of course, an increase for major research equipment and facilities construction of almost 20%. I'm not sure if that's related to your big ideas. I'm wondering whether what's actually going on is you've shifted from kind of a broader, more inclusive research prioritization to really focusing in on a few to the exclusion of many.
We fund science and engineering across all disciplines, everything except for biomedical science, and we all of our directorates are when the budget goes up, they equally or they all take part in it, and when it goes down, they everything is decreased. We believe that all of the disciplines, that's what our whole convergence theme is about, need to work together to address major challenges. And in order to do that, we need to fund all aspects of science and engineering because we never know where the next breakthrough is going to come from. And so the 10 big ideas specifically, well, 6 of them are research ideas and 4 are enabling ideas like convergence and all disciplines coming together, like inclusion and broadening participation. They are a strategic framework to look ahead and say where the country is going, and they're very, very broad. They came out of the core, and they will go back into it once they're funded for a few years. And new strategic thrusts will emerge. But I hope sincerely that we are funding all areas of science and engineering because they're all very, very important for our mission.
Was there a direction to National Science Foundation to cut 10% and find out how to cut it? Or was there a more educated process to decide within each of your departments as to the prioritization there? I'm looking, for example, at biological science, 9.7% cut. Computer information science and engineering, 8.1%. Basic engineering, 13.3% reduction. Math and physical science, 16.5%. Social behavioral and economic science, 5.6%. Polar programs, 19.6%. I mean, these are all reductions. They're all in some range. How were those reductions made? I mean, was this a bottom-up assessment of national science priorities, or was this a top-down direction to simply reduce the budget?
Well, first of all, The president's budget is a 5% reduction that's below the FY19 request in non-defense spending in order to shrink the deficit from nearly 5% of GDP in 2020 to under 1% of GDP in 2029. And the president's budget reflects that steps we take today to reduce the deficit will help the nation remain globally competitive and allow our children and grandchildren to remain unencumbered by today's spending. So that's the overall framework for the 5%. And beyond that, if you're asking for details, we at the National Science Foundation all work when we have a target that we're working for. We work very closely together. It's both a bottoms-up and a top-down process where we decide what it is that are priorities of Congress, priorities of the administration, and priorities of the scientific community through input like all the reports, studies of the National Academy of Sciences and our advisory committees. We put all of that together and we come out with a budget that reflects where we think we need to go.
Did you have a budget cut directive? Back to my question, did you have a budget cut directive to get to 10%, or was there a more deliberate, thoughtful, generating bottom-up process that assessed that, for example, in the area of biological sciences, we needed to cut by almost 10% in that department to arrive at some kind of a merit-based assessment?
I think, as I said, Congressman, the overall framework is the President's initiative to get us back on course with a big deficit that our country is facing, and that requires some pulling back on the funding that we have in non-defense spending. And within that framework, we made very conscious decisions about what to do internally. And I think if you look across the various directorates and you compare them with things that we did in the last couple of years, because the budgets, for example, in FY18, we got the money late enough, an extra $300 million, that we gave it towards one-time funding of especially facilities that were in great need of repair. Arecibo and others are included in that. And then that pushed up certain units in FY18, and then once they had spent that one-time funding, then we then had that money to apply across the board in FY19. And so there are little puts and takes as we go along because of one-time needs. But in setting the 2020 budget, we had this overall framework of minus 5% below the 2019 cap level. And then we went about making conscious decisions about where to take that from. I think you'll find that those the puts and takes are very fairly done within that framework.
Well, they're distributed fairly evenly, I'll give you that, but still it's a big cut overall, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is what kind of prioritization am I supposed to make of that, not only within the scientific community, but kind of across the federal budget? And I understand you're not going to speak to the rest of the federal budget, you're here to talk about National Science Foundation, but again, I'm asking you what is actually going on under the surface of this president's budget in the area of scientific research, which we all agree is critical to this country.
I think so. So this is the president's budget. I think you can see that there are priorities of the administration that are right in sync with NSF priorities in artificial intelligence, quantum research, wireless communications, advanced manufacturing, and all. So we do have the priorities of the administration in our budget.
Okay, thank you very much.